That is our
22nd.
regular council meeting.
Oh, that's right.
Next
Be the
month.
22nd.
And one after that.
We have a joint meeting the week after that,
All right,
correct?
yes. I'll leave the next one.
So, wanna go to a Friday again, or?
Let's do 15. I'll make it work.
5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, what time?
You're talking next Wednesday
Next
again?
Wednesday, the 15th. 5 o'clock?
Let me look, sorry.
Actually, fine for me.
Yeah, I can make 5 work.
So, because you're saying policy procedure, I recommend some of the, or for administrative staff and all the directors, Jackie, the recorder has to be there, and John Burns, does that work?
Jackie will be out of town.
Okay, we had our recorder, Wendy Thorpe.
Yeah, I again will just reiterate, as little staff as necessary, just to be respectful of their time, and most of it's just gonna be, I anticipate the council hammering through different things and discussing what they think should be changed or kept.
Yes, that's fine, I'm trying to capture those things, when I say the right staff, to help capturing it written up. Is that the only agenda item you want for next Wednesday?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I was looking, did you say 5 nods for 5?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Any other future agenda items?
Steve had a couple of suggestions we talked about.
Have we talked more about what we're gonna do on the economic development person hiring process?
Yeah, we actually, since that last interview process, we've gone through that, we are looking at 3 different firms for a headhunter, and we're still receiving applications too, because it's still open until filled. But yes, we're moving that along, we're going, now we're trying to find, what's that?
What about hiring a consultant?
Headhunter consultants.
No, headhunter and hire a consultant
Okay.
to do the job.
Yeah. Do the job.
Oh,
Now, tell me in detail what you're thinking.
So, well, that's why we might need to have a discussion to follow, because they're only, I don't think, you weren't here for that, those interviews, were you?
The first one.
The first one,
On the second one,
so that whole conversation.
So usually,
Put that on the agenda just to follow
a
up with.
consultant, they're consulting you through the process, they're looking, getting the word out and trying to find an applicants with the same headhunter does. But are you saying they are gonna run the process, they're gonna recommend somebody to us?
No, I'm saying we look at a consulting firm to help us with economic
Hire
development.
somebody.
Wow.
We're
We're
trying to find the
Okay, it's
person.
2 different things, okay.
Yeah,
We can just put it on the agenda.
put on the agenda for discussion around
Yeah.
those things.
So there were 3 or 4 of those ideas we talked about in the last interview.
That's why it's
that we should probably put on the agenda.
I think one of the main things that needs to be talked about before we get too far into that is at least have an idea of what a cost would be to have a firm provide those types of services on a temporary basis, and how temporary of a basis would a firm consider doing that for, because I think there's a lot of factors there. Obviously, anything that we can do to help there, but like I say, I don't want to spend a lot of time if we find out that it's either not, 1, financially feasible, or 2, feasible because of a short-term or potential short-term time frame.
And I know it's having dialogue with you on different occasions, you know, some of the people would actually apply for that here in Utah, and it has not been overwhelming support of those firms, so we'll walk through that.
Yeah.
That, if it's that kind of solid, we had to do an RFP out and go through a process like that.
Anything else, Steve?
No, I think that's it for tonight.
Okay.
I had a couple on my list. Do you have anything?
No, go ahead.
On our regular agenda list, I'd like to add just kind of an open item. So often we ask questions, we ask for follow-up information, especially for us, a couple weeks or sometimes a month, there's only 1 meeting goes by, and we forget by the next meeting because we're concentrating on those agenda items, and staff gets busy with everything, and there's some of that information that kind of gets pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. So we're just adding an item on every meeting, kind of those open
There's a way with that, because we are send the draft agenda to you all, by 3 to 4 days before we post, if you wanna follow up, we can actually just add it to the agenda, so the public knows what we're
I guess maybe it's
discussing.
just for me, my faulty memory when it comes to meeting. I look at the next meeting, focusing on what's on that list. I haven't been good at remembering, hey, I asked for that a month ago.
I think that makes sense though, having kind of a running list of open questions or open items, like we're waiting on an answer from staff about something. We just keep it on that running agenda until we.
It's on that forecast agenda, it's there.
So I've had a couple of times where a resident has asked me, hey, remember that meeting where you asked for that? Did you ever get an answer? And I go,
But if you review that forecast agenda, it goes out with the draft agenda before we actually, we are listing those things. If you don't see it there, it's good for us to remind us. I know one we're still, one update is the economic analysis for, particularly over that southeast area. And Alan's not ready to do presentation, but the heritage agenda is just so big. We're trying to do, when's a good time to talk about that? The value of bands of the residential part, or raw land, or wherever it is. As requested way back, November, I'm trying to remember what it was, but.
just an idea.
Can I make a
It's just
a follow-up suggestion to that maybe then? Maybe some of those follow-up items, because again, our agendas are so full and trying to remember to bring them back, some of those things. I'm wondering about if we take some of those things and put them in maybe a smart sheet, a council smart sheet, as far as those topics that then may, once they're brought up here, may be able to just be assigned to a department head at that point for some follow-up information. And we can then view that smart sheet to see that information is updated. It's just a suggestion, again, to make sure. I think that it would help with.
Anything, I don't know.
I think it may help with just the overall communication again and tracking of some of those follow-up items. If once we bring them up here, they're able to be added to that sheet, and we have at least a avenue, something that we can all
Something
refer
to
to
track.
frequently. And one, it's going to help refresh our memories about something we may have talked about and have forgotten. But two, if it's something that we have there that we can track progress on it or something, and we have access to the department heads for them to go on there. If it applies to them, then they can put that information in there. But we can, that's something we, as council members, if we created that, we could look at any time to look at the status on certain things. And that may cut down the need to rehash some of those things here, but it may prompt us then to say, okay, this is something that based on the new information, now we do want it as an agenda item. Just a suggestion to help, because I think you're right. I think we need, we do have a lot of things continually on there, and sometimes staying on top of those and tracking those becomes difficult.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and we used to have, a long time ago, we used to have a sheet that was like that Jackie would then go in and she would note anything that you'd asked for follow-up on. And then, the managers and directors had access to that so that they could either take that and then make sure that something's presented to bring it back, or they could put comments in there, and then council could go in and kind of see what the status was. So we can just revive that form, and then that way, it's a constant
it's worth a
working
shot.
document, and
It's
then
al-
you can note on it even if you wanna see that back.
It's already been
Immediately.
created, but,
So,
this is 2 election cycles ago when we
yeah,
started that.
it was,
And people wouldn't follow up on it.
No, I get it, there's onus on our part in order to do that.
That's why I think the idea, I'm not sure that everything that's on that list is necessarily an agenda item, but I think a
Right, just
review of
something you're
that list
asking us
should be on the
questions
agenda. I think is that what you're saying? Not,
It's not general, it's actually council request of information.
yeah, we've got 5 or 6 things we've asked for.
You know me, I'm not good with the technology stuff, so
yeah, so I'll send
whatever
you,
works
it
for
really looks
everybody,
just
I'll
like
do.
it
I'll
looks
put
like
in
an
the effort.
Excel document, but it's got a comment section.
Has numbers instead of words, so you might not
Numbers are good.
recognize it.
Numbers are good.
So yeah, we'll send it out and you can see how you like it, cause
Right.
then they can just give you, answer questions right on.
I think it's also maybe a good tool right now, we put it like open item, I don't know how we wanna list that, because that public that likes a little more clarity what we're putting on the agenda. That just came back just a month ago, there wasn't enough information given. So, we can put something on there, but we have to be very clear that it's just council giving us, asked us questions about where this to timeline, what we're, if I can send that.
And if one is ready to be reported back on, we'd just move that to the agenda.
Right.
I used to work on a task system like that all the time, and it definitely have a column for the date it was requested, the date of expected completion, notes where it's at, who is it assigned to.
Assigned to.
That's what it all does, and it's really good that way. I'll tell you this, it's the same philosophy I've actually, and made a comment last council meeting. Unless it's just come up brand spanking new within the last week and the council needs to hear it, my city manager updates are gonna be very minimal. I believe we have plenty of time to make sure we get the item on the agenda so we can discuss it, those items and update you. And just have a broad thing, city manager updates, so the public feels like we're a community statement, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't wanna be accused that we're hiding anything, absolutely. So,
So our first item on that would be on the next agenda, report on the task list.
There you go.
we absolutely can.
Follow up on that item. The only other thing I had might go more with the board assignments, but we had talked about having council members on different committees. So follow up on that conversation we had. If that's a future agenda item or if that's one for 9 into that. That's all I got.
Not sure if it's a future
Yeah,
date.
and there's been kind of a few assignments made already, literature on the finance committee, that's what it is. And then there was one that request on the economic development committee. You know, once your council members be part of that. So we're trying to figure out what our committee we want to be involved with, because there was a time we had council involved with every committee, but the council were not attending those meetings. That was the garden committee, that was the arts council, that was all those things. And so we're looking at the direction, I get the finance committee, you know, some of those are in economic development. But once that starts, you know, you're part of that committee of guiding that through. And so if you want to open up back to all those committees, there's a lot of those committees. And they'd love to have you be a part of those committees, but they will not be attended. So we're just cycling through them, so find out what you want us to do.
So that's my question, is are we good to talk about that under the board assignments tonight? Or do we move through the board assignments and have this as a separate item at a future meeting?
Yeah, board assignments are kind of different than committee assignments.
Probably is kind of different. I have a couple things that are more just informational. The day of the legislature, I will not be here to attend that with the kids, so I'm just making sure that as many of you can go as possible. That means a lot to them, I know. And,
What was the date on that again? I know I'm planning on attending.
29th.
29th, thank you.
I'll be there.
And, my assignment on the Jordan Valley Water Board will conflict with work meeting for city council. So today is
The first one of the month, yes.
first one of the month, just so everyone's aware of that I would have to be attending that. I will be attending that, so I won't be able to be in
I'm glad you
attendance
brought that
here.
up, because we've been wanting to know if maybe they would just in time, or, we just went backwards, you know, trying to create more time for our meeting. I do know this, and Justin can about it, is that a lot of times they're done, but you still, but traffic-wise, you'll be still running to keep here in time. And so,
What time do those meetings start for you, Sherry?
3 o'clock
And where are they held at?
in
Jordan Valley.
West Jordan.
13th
Nine
West
a.m.
and.
Just off.
South.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, just so you know that if I'm not here, it's not because I'm
And that's in March,
trying to
right?
be negligent.
When that actually.
It'll depend, once the Senate does confirmation, either I'll start in February or March, depending on when they get that from the legislature. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that,
Is that-
especially the public.
is
I'm
that
not trying to be negligent
The
on my
first
being
one,
here.
when are those meetings scheduled?
Second Wednesday of the month.
Of the month?
Congratulations for your appointment.
Yeah, I'm
With the
excited.
governor's office, and
Absolutely.
I did have one other thing I wanted to add to the agenda, and in light of some of the complications we had with, let's call it an employee discipline matter recently. I'm curious as to some of the time of that background. I was told that might have been a 12 to an 18-month process that's been evolving.
That would be probably the best thing for us to do, to have that in a closed meeting.
Yeah, I think I'd like to do that as a closed meeting agenda item where we discuss kind of how those policies and procedures about employee discipline are implemented, how something could take 12 months or 18 months to resolve kind of thing. I'd like some understanding about that.
Can I just clarify on that? Are you wanting to talk about the specific situation or just the policy? Because the policy is not a closed item.
Right. It's gotta be about the person.
The specific situation would be, obviously.
I don't, I'd like to understand the policies and procedures better so I could understand why something might, if there was a problem, it could take that long to get to a resolution.
And I would not
And
want
so I
to
don't
talk
know
about any of that in open meeting whatsoever, because that person has their own attorney involved.
Sure.
And we have our
Right.
attorney, we have more
Got
than one attorney working on our side, and that is litigation / also personnel, so. It's typically some area that I would feel
Okay.
uncomfortable about having to talk about in a public meeting.
That's why I wanted to
Yeah, and that's
clarify
fine.
the discussion, the policy versus the situation.
And maybe there, because of the overlap, we need to do that in closed session.
So something tells me we'll probably have a discussion about that in closed session, and then we'll know if we can have that.
Okay, maybe
Next
that's
part.
fair enough.
Is
Okay, good enough.
Alright, any other future agenda items? Okay, we will move on to item 2.1, continue from December 11th, 2019 meeting, discussion relating to the Unified Fire Interlocal Cooperative Agreement. Brian?
It's got my name next to it, but we brought this to you last council meeting, we had time to look over the interlocal. I do not have any concern, there was a lot of cleanup items, this is the operational side of Unified Fire, it's not the district interlocal, which is the taxing entity. Basically, we have Chief Peterson next to my name here and talk to him, answer any questions you may have if you look through the interlocal. There's a question about some of the information there, and Brian, Unified Fire attorney is in here as well, answering any question you might have with interlocal. So this time is really yours. We also have it on the agenda for approval tonight. That's still your decision in the general meeting. But there's some things written in that it's probably our best interest to pass it. If you've read page 17 and back page 31. Now we're still looking for direction. You've had it for a while now. You know, ask some questions about that.
Most of you guys, if you have questions, I mean, last month's meeting, I wanted to bring it up because I had only had 2 meetings to jump in the fire and try to look it over. So, yeah, so needed more eyes on it, and I left town for extended holiday. So
I'm wondering if it'd be beneficial either to have Chief Peterson or Brian maybe just to talk about a little bit of the highlights of the changes and the reason behind some of those changes for us to be able to understand what it was previously versus what it is now and the reason behind those changes. So I think that to make sure that we're all clear on exactly what that means to our city moving forward, if without obviously taking too long to do that, but.
yeah, that would be great if they're okay with that. One of the issues, as I kind of expressed to Chief Peterson in our emails back and forth the last few days, is that the tough part has been that we haven't been, and it's our own fault, we haven't been as involved in the process of creating this as we should have been, so we're behind the eight ball. It's kind of our own fault, so what do you guys to kind of help us tie the two together?
Well, why don't I, if it pleases you, I'll just kind of hit some highlights, but I will say that Councilmember Martin was involved and she was pretty active, and the city manager's been active, but like everything, you all have committee assignments and things that you're working on. You've had good input into this and good thoughts as far as coming through this. So a lot of this particular revision comes from the fact that the existing interlocal was from 2004 and really had to do with the separation of from Salt Lake County to UFA, which Councilmember Smith is well aware of how that processed. So that agreement was in place and it identified some things that related to the movement of equipment, the movement of apparatus, the establishment of some things. But when reality, as we started looking at it, there wasn't a lot left in that agreement that reflected what the new organization was. And then honestly, in January of 17, when the townships came to being, there became a heightened need to kind of review and look at the overall situation of how UFA fit, right? So some of those dialogues that drove this was the fact that most of the equipment that was brought into the UFA has since gone through its life cycle and moved out. In the formation of UFA, UFSA was not a part yet, it was formed after, so there was some language that melded back and forth that really needed to be moved out. So that while the term talks about contract city, it's really more of a direct member city or a member city through the UFSA, right, a member municipality. So those were part of the driving factors. And honestly, for the last 18 months, we've worked on this, and we put a couple of paragraphs around it that basically said we were not going to make any changes that were just a vote of the board, right? We were going to make sure that there was time, we were going to make sure there was dialogue, and Brian and I took the bigger concepts and we took them in chunks to the board and to the dialogue and out to the communities, and addressed the more challenging conversations. And the biggest one really was weighted vote. And the one that drove this weighted vote issue was that there were 12 members in December of 2016 and 17 members in January of 17. And the way that worked for the UFA was everybody had an equal vote. The challenge we had was that it was my opinion that we embrace the townships and figure it out, as opposed to stiff-arming the townships and saying you can't come in. They were absolutely municipalities, they counted, they fit, but we chose to take a bit of time to understand what that impact was. And we also needed a chance for the new municipalities to mature and figure out where they fit, how they rolled in, and understand that particular role. So the first big issue that we started tackling was, is a weighted vote necessary, and should we look at this? And we started flowing through, as much as 18 months ago, initial concepts. And the interesting thing is we first looked at both member fee and population, and then it evolved around and it went to population, then it went back to member fee, and we allowed for the same dialogue that you're talking about tracking is so important, because there's an evolution of thought that comes as you listen to a concept and you allow members to digest it, right? And then you listen to a concept and you allow members to digest it. And it settled in fairly early, and then about 8 months later it raised its head again for more dialogue. And we ended up landing on a blended value versus population to determine the weighted vote, right? That was a big part of making the center local hit. So separating from the county, UFSA forming, a 15-year-old agreement, time to look at this fresh.
One of the immediate questions that has come up is how often are those numbers updated? Population.
So the population is updated every time Chem Gardner posts their new data, which is typically around July, right? The member fee numbers are updated every time we update a budget. So when we update the budget, we have good clarity in the member fee. And then in the UFSA, we take at that time what's the value of all the taxable assessments inside of the UFSA to divvy up the weighted vote for the UFSA, right? So it'll stay in touch, but obviously Chem Gardner is going to be a little bit behind what your projections are. But the board didn't want to take any one city's projections of population and use that as that number. So like a growing city is going to continue to get an increased weight, but their population numbers are going to come a little bit behind what you know to be true. But otherwise we start to run into a guesswork, right, or an estimation. Values come in whatever the tax assessor puts on the tax rolls, and we take everything inside of that. For a member city, a direct member city, we simply take their member fee, and then we bring that together. So that'll change each year. So really you can look at, every time we adopt a new budget, we should be able to completely update the chart and put that into the binders so that it's very clear what that weighted vote is. And as part of the weighted vote, we didn't want a smaller community like immigration to be completely minimized, because they brought good value to us. So the land hit that, let's only use that weighted vote, apply it when 2 members ask for it in a budget amendment or adoption. Not while you're discussing an issue that might be related to funds, but any time there's an adoption or an amendment. And the idea was we want the input from everybody, but in the end, our larger communities wanted to make sure that a few smaller communities didn't drive the funding into an area that was not where the majority wanted to go, right? Population, we have some areas that are heavy industrial. The unincorporated area brings a lot of value into the UFSA, but not a lot of population. There's only 10,000 people left in unincorporated. So the unincorporated gets a little more in value. Other communities have more population, a little lower volume of revenue. It kind of balanced it out a bit. Honestly, Councilman, I was shocked at how quick you absorbed things in our first meeting because it's a pretty complicated item. And you kind of suggested maybe we blend them, right? And we brought the 50-50 idea back, and that allowed the county to settle in, that allowed a number of groups to settle in. Some really key things that this adjusts and fixes is it allows for, like for Herriman, you had a 1/18 vote starting next month if Brighton comes on board, right? Or you would have ended up with a 5.5% vote at UFA. With this change, because you're a growing city and because you're one of the larger cities, you now end up with a 9.33% vote. And since your value and population is growing, that's up 1% from what it would have been just a year and a half ago. So you're going to see that grow if you continue to grow at a faster pace than the other members, right? So you'll see as you grow, your vote grows in that vein. But one of my goals as the CEO is really to make sure that we're all playing well in the sandbox, we're all doing the right thing. We come to the table representing our community, and yet at the same time representing the organization so that we're healthier when we're together. And to do that, I think you need to know that you've gained some power in this change in the way they vote. The county before the formation of townships had a huge portion at 170,000 population. The moment they formed, they dropped to 10,000 population and lost significant value. And so there was a lot of discussion about reducing their vote from what it was prior, right? And in the dialogue, where we landed was they currently have 3. With the new interlocal, they will drop to 2. And those 2 will split the county's weight equally. So together with population and value, the county has 9.22% of the vote. So they actually have less vote than you in this change, right? And the 2 members that attend each get half of that vote. And they're comfortable with that change. And when one is gone, they don't get to use the other's vote, right? When one is gone, that's their vote. And in the county, we wanted to make sure that there was an elected member from the governing body on this, right? In the old language, it said elected member, and the county placed a really good person on the board, but he was the county surveyor. And our worry was, that doesn't really reflect representing the people's needs that we wanted on this group. So we added language to say it has to be an elected member from the governing body to clarify that. And then at the request of the county, the mayor wanted to be able to appoint a deputy mayor or an associate deputy mayor to attend in her place going forward. And as we talked about it, the agreement was, well, the county, as long as there is one elected member from the governing body from the county, which is going to come from the council, then the board was okay with allowing the mayor to appoint a deputy or an associate deputy mayor. So every community has a formally elected from the public person to speak on the money and the population from that particular vein. So those were positive dialogues. That was 18 months of dialogue, right, to get to that spot. And Councilman Martin participated, engaged, I think really well represented your thoughts. It just, by the time it came back to being with your attorneys and with you, she was not in the room any longer. for that, right? Which put you in that seat of
So we kinda
drinking
have
from a
these-
fire
Yeah,
hose,
we have these
right?
discussions
In
here
that-
during that time.
in that manner. So the county's vote really has diminished, yours has grown, but in the end, we very rarely have split votes. But we need to prepare for the potential, right? We need to prepare for that conflict and for that issue. Most of the time, what we try to do is make sure that every member has time to think and communicate and stall the conversation until people have a chance to really think about it, which is part of how we rolled this out. In this current interlocal, the way it was written actually allowed for the board to take a 2/3 vote and change the interlocal in one fell swoop, and we were totally uncomfortable with that. So while it didn't say it in policy, we agreed as a board to basically state that the board will adopt a recommended version with a 2/3 vote and then give all the communities a chance to do exactly what you're doing before they make a final consideration. In no way did they want to obligate everybody to a 2/3 vote because it was just not the right thing to do. And I think Brian even questioned whether that was legally right, even though the agreement said that we could do that. So we needed to fix those components and find that best consensus mode, right? Those were some of the core parts. Then it came in the really, really hard discussions that none of us want to experience, right? But we wanted to take our experiences and our knowledge about a new member wanting to come in and identify how do we make sure this new member doesn't simply cremate us as an organization, right? You could take on a new member and have a problem. So we adopted a lot of the language that is in the statute that talks about assessing the city, figuring out who they are, what they are, how is their apparatus in a good shape, are their staffing in a good shape, stations, what is the burden that we're potentially taking on, and then allow for some private conversations that may need to occur, but never ever let a new member be admitted without the entire board having the consideration about whether we want this new member on board. Because the existing interlocal really allowed for just members to appear without anybody else knowing, right? And that was a key part. There were a few events that occurred that we wanted to capture. Well, how do we want to process that? And then for withdrawal, we wanted to have dialogue that without anybody in the middle of it, how do we go ahead and make a withdrawal that makes sure that both parties are whole and in good shape? So we identified, if you look through that session, there's pieces about making sure that both organizations are healthy and good. And for me, respecting the fact that if a community wants to leave, I want to help them. There's nothing about this controlling anybody. The idea was not to do that. But I would agree that in the past, that was one of the targets that was there, was to try and hook people and control them and make it hard to leave, and then be angry if they talk about it. Well, in my mind, I think our responsibility is we want the community to win every time. So we tried to rewrite this in a way that said, all right, if this is the best thing for the community, let's talk about how we go and part our ways so that we can be in good shape. The community gets the things coming that they need and desire and want. And me as an organization, my biggest concern is, how do I make sure my people are okay, right? I want to make sure that you, in this interlocal, we wrote it out, that you will consider our people for the first chance of hire, and I'll promote it, and I'll say, please do, and I'll pay out their vacation to you, right? And you take on their vacation liability, but I pay that. You take them on with seniority, which is simply a number, but it's meaningful to them. We send them with their turnouts so that whatever age is left in them, they go with you. And as we start working it through, the employees, those that really want to work maybe in a smaller organization get an opportunity to. Those that want to stay don't. Win-win, right? But those conversations are very hard when you don't have any blueprint and you're in the middle of it. And you end up with hurt feelings, you end up with both sides feeling like they've been taken advantage of. So we spent a lot of time discussing how do we accept new members and how do we withdraw, right? Those were key. The apparatus and equipment, some of the capital components, our capital plan is now rolled through a replacement program that's financed. Apparatus and equipment is extraordinarily expensive. You know, it's $600,000 for an engine, $1.2 million for a truck, and all of the MDTs and the radios. We have it forecasted out 12 to 15 years. We buy on every 3-year increments. We're into the second cycle of those notes to make that happen. But it's $10 or $12 million every 3 years to make sure that we are planning properly to replace our ladder trucks, our engines, on our everything properly. To do that would require me to put about $4 to $5 million a year into a fund to eventually get to cash. But in the meantime, I've got to buy stuff at the same time. So currently we've chose to go with notes. And it's healthy to do that today. If the rates change, that would be no longer good. But the cycle of 3 notes allows us to smooth out the costs long term to the budget, and that debt is there. In order to absolve any withdrawing member from any of that debt, we simply say you can purchase at whatever the current value is of an apparatus, and you're absolved of any debt for anything. And any apparatus that's in your city today, right? And if it's not on a loan, I would assume you probably want the apparatus that's already there, right? We would sell it with all the equipment on and be in that space. If it's part of the loan, I have to use it as collateral, and we would substitute something else. We'd get a third party to come in and evaluate the value. It's not us, it's not you. We would pick somebody and say, you tell us what that looks like, right? And I think that helps to make sure that we don't end up with hard feelings. And when in the end, I wanted our organization to shift from a control mindset to a let the community win mindset, right? So those were the primary issues that we've walked through the last 18 months. And hopefully, as you read through it, you saw that theme and you saw that goal. There may be a lot of pages in there, but it's a big organization. And I think it took a lot of work to make that kind of fit. We tried to take a complex issue like weighted vote and make it simple, right? A lot of words to try and make it simple to be on one page, but we had to have formulas that we could recreate effectively every year, right? Now the board could decide, if Chem Gardner Institute goes away, the board could decide, all right, let's pick a new one, right? But it has to be something that everybody can go to the website and learn exactly what it is, where nobody else has a chance to manipulate it or find a new number or change that, right? The member fee is in the budget, adopted, and it's dialed in right there, right? It's easy to pick the right number. The tax assessor, you can identify exactly what that tax is for the UFSA members. So there's really no way to play with that weighted vote. If we tried, it'd be easy to figure it out, which was important to us to capture. So that's probably the biggest themes that came from it.
If I may, I'm just going to open up to the council a little bit. I think one of the main sticking points, at least that first read, and I think something that we kind of hit on the last meeting, but after reading again and discussing individually, was with the withdrawal provisions. At first read, it says you don't get to take it, right? And that, I think that was kind of a knee-jerk reaction for most of us. I know it was mine. The first time I read it, I was like, wait, what? But in talking with a few other board members and with our own expert, correct me if I'm wrong, the way it's been explained to me is that really going back to the origination of UFSA or UFA and what was brought in, really all that equipment components have been cycled out.
Yeah.
And what has been brought in is under this financing system, and this basically says, yeah, if you want to pick up basically where we left off with that equipment, then this allows us to do it. Basically makes you let us do that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's not the most eloquent.
Yeah, and what I didn't want either was to have my logistics identify what that cost is, or that value. I don't want that. And I don't necessarily want your logistics to, I want someone else.
Question on that specifically. When it says we can basically pay for the value of that, are we looking at the amortized value, or are we looking at the current market value?
Current market of whatever that used
like
equipment.
for example.
Yeah, so when we take an engine and surplus it, right, it goes down, we typically send it down to Las Vegas, they surplus it, and what originally cost 600,000 might sell for 150. But that's a surplus engine. If we take an engine that may be 6 years old or 5 years old, we get a firm to come in and say, if you were to sell this, what would it sell for? And that's the dollar that it would be. And it's not what we think it is. It's not what we paid for it. It's not what it costs us to replace it. That's the value today and what lifespan is left. And it doesn't require you to do that either. I mean, you could decide you want to put a whole new fleet in. It doesn't matter. And part of where we have separated our capital fund, it is in its own account, right? It is funded through that plan. The loans are paid for through the operating, but every sale of every equipment, everything drops back into the capital fund, does not get applied into operations, right? So every surplus sale puts money into the capital fund, and in between those purchases allows for maybe a purchase of an engine or a car or some need that always comes up in between the 3-year cycle. So anything, like if you were to buy 2 engines and a ladder truck, that sale, that money would simply drop back into capital and be applied for either some cash or to keep the cycle of notes going smooth. So if we had a spike for a year of rates, we could smooth it out by using a little bit of that money so that we don't spike anybody's member fee.
You think about spike on these notes, government gets one heck of a price on a note, loan. It's not very, I don't want to look at you, our experience with that, maybe 1.5%. And we usually have like 1.5%, 2% money. So it doesn't move much. There's not much of a risk there. And if we were to plop 20 million in a bank account, we wouldn't earn anything, right? I mean, we just wouldn't earn anything, and I'd have to build that account up in the first place. So in today's world, this is better. But I'm not saying that in 20 years it doesn't flip. When I bought my first house in 1981, the rates were 16%, and I was able to get it to a 9.9, and I made sure it was assumable because it was such an amazing rate. You know, it's such a different world today. It doesn't mean we won't go back there. So we have to be prepared for whatever the economy goes to. Just comparable, that's what we do with our fleet.
Yeah. Other questions? Brian's here for some of the more specifics, but the way we flowed this is, again, we took the chunks, right? And we started through our governance committee, took the chunks, had the dialogue, let the digestion fit, and then we kept putting it together until it was ready to be a larger conversation. Then we brought that to the board for a larger conversation, and then Brian brought that to all the attorneys to make sure so that the attorneys were not surprised before you as a total group saw it. That created a lot of work to change a few words here and there. We took those changes back to the board for more dialogue, allowed people to continue talking, right? And then we evolved to today. Yeah, it was honestly, the process was really healthy, you know, it really was, because it gave the entire board to think about some of the things that are hard to talk about, hard to think about, but it forced us to have the dialogue, and that's where we landed in this space. Is it perfect? Nothing is perfect, but it's definitely consensus and supported by the board members in balancing their individual needs and the belief that the organization is providing a good regional service. Does that help?
That's great.
For clarification, this agreement's proposed
A 25-year term with 5-year reviews of it, is that correct?
Yeah. It was a 50 original, and there was a discussion, really 50? There's so much world change.
Yeah.
But the 5-year was to force, let's go through it and make sure there's any need, and if there's additions, make the changes.
Yeah, well, I think that's healthy, especially since you bring up the fact that, you know, the original agreement was 15 years old and how much changed in that
Yeah.
first 15 years of the organization. So I think that mandatory review every 5 is very healthy to force the board at the time to go through and to acknowledge what is or is working and what may not be working anymore based on some of those changes that occur.
Those were my points. Thank you very much,
Wonderful.
Chief.
Thank you.
Any further discussion by the council?
Well, obviously having some knowledge of this document previously and some experience with how it was affected previously, there's a lot of very positive changes in what's presented for members, whether you're a current member, whether you're a potential member, or whether you choose to be a withdrawing member. There's a lot more clarity and direction in this current interlocal than the previous one, and I think Chief Peterson did a good job in describing that he wanted this process to be able to look out for its members, no matter what side of that equation that you're on, because I think it's fair to say that the first one didn't do a good job of that. And so I appreciate the fact that they took that approach in rewriting this, because it is a big document. There is a lot that's contained in it, because again, it is a big organization, has a lot of moving parts to it. And like you say, having been familiar with it and experiencing it firsthand, I think that there's a lot of very positive things that have been recommended in this one here. I think to his point, it's, like any other document, it's never going to be perfect, and there's going to be things that come up, but there's definitely also a process for the board to look at and address those issues as they come up as well. So I'm very impressed with the work that's been done.
I viewed it as, I could coin it as it cleaned things up. It was not clear. It was very confusing to understand, and just cleaned up a lot of those awful issues.
I will ask one further question in there, just to make sure I'm understanding it. But when it talks about personnel as it relates to a withdrawing party, if I understand this correctly, if an entity withdraws, by agreeing to this, it says that they will first offer employment to employees of current UFA.
You're close. It says you will first run an exclusive process and consider employees from UFA. No mandatory of anything. What I'm looking for is to help my organization feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Where so if it were to happen, you would run a process with UFA employees, pick what you want, and then do whatever else you need. I propose that I give you a list.
I've heard that before.
We wouldn't want to be forced to take somebody like Riley, right?
But all this was, I had my labor group. I had my labor group be really active in helping with this, right? Because part of what I want is a stable organization. We will recruit better people with a stable organization, right? We will find, and we've had great luck. I mean, we had over 1,000 interested in this recent hiring. We had 600 or 700 take the test, and we have 33 people that we oriented this week that are starting new employment, and they're coming because we're stable. We want to perpetuate that, right? So we're not saying that you have to take anybody, but we're asking, and not for the chief. We don't want that limit, or your executive staff, right? That's your important pick, and it's spelled out in there that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply for your captains, maybe your battalions and engineers and firefighters. Please run a process just with our people, because I'm going to promote it, saying that this is about winning for the community, right? And if you love working in that city and you would like to work in that department, that's great. That's good for us. And for me, if I can balance my staffing and not ever lay anybody off, I'm in a much better position long term. And the community wins. I mean, and let's say you do that, and we do that 6 months into the process, and you pick some of the people from us, we could even start making sure we move them into that community and letting them start work in that community that they're going to be working in permanently before the 12 months, which makes a much simpler transition than what I came in 6 months into it with the Draper, right? And we had to sit down and we both had to start dealing with some of the challenges that were occurring, and we found some good ground to stop some of the stuff that was going in various places. And it was nobody individual's fault. There was no document. There was no roadmap. There was differences of opinion. And this was a lot of conversation without anybody in the middle of it. And so this was a piece of it. So no mandatory. Just run something exclusive first. Pick what you're comfortable with and want, and then move on to filling out your roster.
And like I say, obviously having been through that experience, the one thing I wanted to make sure they're there, that if an entity does choose to separate, again, UFA has great qualified individuals, no doubt about it, but a lot of other agencies do too. And you don't know who will be interested until you put that process out there completely and have that full opportunity to see who is interested and how they stack up against one another from department to department. So I think that's an important piece is again, you talk about the potential of a new organization coming on board. And I know I experienced that. I know Chief Carr experienced that himself as well, you know, with the new police department here. So that was my only question for clarification there.
And for me, I'm just looking for a two-phase piece, right? And let's say you decide we're not gonna fill any more than 20% with this part, and if other UFA people wanna apply for the other 80, totally your call. But for me, it was a way for me to help my organization feel comfortable. And that was my desire. And I think we all want stability in that way, right, in that space.
Well, I think what helps on the other side, maybe you can give a little more detail for those of us that aren't as ingrained in it, is that you said that you will pay something as they come.
If they come over, right, we are gonna pay out.
This is a huge piece, by the way.
This
is a huge
I understand what it
piece.
is what we went through the
So
police
if-
department, cause we didn't get this.
So first off, if they're gonna come to you, right, they're gonna leave us, we are going to pay their vacation, right? We would just as soon pay you their vacation hours and they get those vacation hours. Now, if the employee wants to be paid off on those vacation hours, I think we have it in there that they have the option. But now they come over with 0 hours and no animosity towards you, because that was a pick they made.
Yep.
I'm not paying sick leave off and not expecting you to grant them sick leave hours, right? In any way. There is no URS debt for us. We have validated that up and down for fire departments, with URS, right? And one of the differences is fire departments are really, there's only two categories for fire. There's only those that pay Social Security and those that don't. There is not. Police has a lot of different things, and I don't pretend to know where that sits. But there is no, when a person transfers over in our environment, there's no debt, so there's no new debt for you. We will send them over with their turnouts, because why do
Another
I
huge
want,
piece, by the way.
why on earth do I want 5-year-old, 6-year, all they'll do if I take them back is I'll put them on a shelf and they won't fit anybody, and then they'll time out, right? That's not of value. You have to suffer with all the stuff they keep in their pockets, right? They have kitchen sinks in their pockets in some cases. But again, it's about comfort. It's about making sure that this transition is healthy and the community wins. That's our goal here, is the community winning. And anyway, does that help?
Tremendously.
Can I ask just a question? It's kind of a minor detail. One of the things in here talking about the 4-minute travel time, the ISO rating of 3 or better. How often is that checked? How often are those times measured? And
right.
I'm just curious, making sure that because we're growing so fast,
Well, the
those
4
can change
minute
pretty quick.
is a drive time, right? Not an actual response time, but that's an ISO. The ISO's target is to get an engine a perfect rating for ISO is an engine every 1.5 miles and a truck every 2.5. That gets into the class 1, right? The goal of this statement is that what I don't want is any community to decide we don't need a station within a 4-minute travel time. And because if they did that, like if I had a city that decided, look, I only want to operate with 1 fire station, right? And okay, you can do that, but your station in this deployment model in a built upon area, and that's the key, is the built upon. That's an ISO term that does that. You have areas that are rural, you have areas that are starting to get built out, and as they grow, your Rose Canyon area is a great example that why we have the property and why there needs to be a station is it's becoming percentage-wise more, what's that?
That's the county area.
Well, your area that's growing out is covering that too, right? And that station is in the city and it's getting more and more built upon. We need to put a station there. So UFSA needs to build one out there as it grows. Because if we don't do that, it affects the ISO rating across the board as it gets built upon. Now we lose that. And then what happens over here in the district affects everybody. So the goal there is to get us, to make sure that we maintain that. So as you grow, the owner builds, as a direct member grows. A great example of where this has been a challenge is in 2 direct member cities, Cottonwood Heights and Holiday. Pretty similar population, very different shape. Holiday is a pretty tight circle, and 1 primary station with 3 or 4 around serving a very small percentage is totally fine. Cottonwood Heights has this big arc on it, requires 2 stations to meet the coverage, makes their cost significantly more, but it's because of that arc and that distance and all being built upon costs more money for us to staff. And it doesn't really matter whether a station goes on 500 calls or 1,000 calls, the staffing cost is the same, right? That staffing cost is the same. So we deploy based on the coverage because that's part of what the ISO rating is, right? And we already know that we're gonna be a 2, and we may even get to a 1 with our rating we're finishing right now. But we wanted to put that benchmark in there at a 3 or better so that you can count on the fact that your community is gonna get good insurance ratings. And we don't want what happens across the valley to affect you. So that language makes that commitment. Now, obviously, there's a path to get there. It doesn't mean that the moment that you put 1 road in, it means that there needs to be a plan and we need to move that way and we need to staff it and make sure that it stays.
And that's why my question was more along, how often is that reviewed?
ISO wants to come in every 4 to 5 years. In reality, they don't need it except for every 10. But they're so ISO is a private organization, right? They're actually, if you know much about them, I did a bunch of work on them when I was in Oregon. And they're really a private, it's insurance investors that serve on their board of directors. They provide ratings and they try to review, and then they set that aside, and then the insurance company can decide what they want to use those ratings for, right? And that's for residential. Commercial, there's 3,500 ISO employees out there doing ratings of commercial buildings, so the rating of your insurance is much less valuable on a commercial because it's really more about the building.
Understood.
Right? They're in all the time, right? But fire departments, generally, they're trying to rate 3 to 5 year gaps, but they've never met that target in my 40 years.
And let me be specific, the reason I ask is, with the speed that we're growing, I mean, there's forecasts I've seen over the next 10 years, maybe 30,000 more residents out here, right? And there's new things that could even increase that number. A 4-minute drive time could change. A few months could add 10 or 15 seconds, and another year could add a minute to a drive time.
Well, I'll share with you, we're measuring that constantly now.
Okay, I was gonna mention that.
With our
So
Terra,
just
we
curious,
have two pieces of software. In Terra right now, we'll give you all the live data and we'll know exactly, and we can watch the trend. And we're getting logins as we finish this work that'll give you direct login and you can look at it.
Which is really what
Riley's been showing it and sharing it with it. But where we're going to is we want you in the community to dial in, look at Herriman, and look at, well, where are the traffic accidents? Where are these calls? How much time is it taking to get there? And we'll be able to see those trends increasing, right, by response times. But if we just look drive time, we're using the really GIS Esri data that tells us we put penalties on turns, but it doesn't measure the actual impact of traffic changes as much. But we have approved, and we are going out for an RFP right now for more of a station location and apparatus placement software that will immediately talk to us about the value of where we put 103, right, and what the impact truly will be, where we build that station. It'll talk to us about when road construction comes in, what the actual impact will be to response times and where we should temporarily place an engine during that construction. But as we evolve into it, they start bringing in planning data and UDOT data and road data, and now we can anticipate that.
It's awesome.
So this software is phenomenal. We did a big demo. We brought in a lot of the councilmen and we authorized the purchase, and now we're in the RFP for it. But we want to get that in place before we build the next station so that we can not make the mistakes that sometimes occur. The good thing is most of the stations were built with a good gut check, right? But But now we can say, what impact would it be to take the ambulance and put it from here to there? And maybe as traffic increases, we start spiking out our ambulances away from fire stations in a strip mall during the peak drive time days to reduce response times, right? Not every solution requires a fire station, right? So if we take an area and we say, look, during this time, this is really where our congestion is, and this software is telling us, if we move it in here, this software will say, your response time will improve by 32 seconds, period. Now we know that. That software is gonna help us immensely across our entire district, right? And then we can answer it. As far as ISO, they don't care how long it takes you to get there. Unfortunately, there is nothing in ISO that talks about time. And honestly, the engine every 1.5 miles and truck every 2.5 is from a RAND study of response times in New York City in 1960s. And it was a station location study done by, and they applied that through, and they said the further you are away, the more penalties you get. And if you don't have this hose, and if you don't have this coupling, and if you don't have this hose clamp, you lose points, right? And if you don't have enough ladder trucks, you lose points. And it's only accidentally accurate.
And your fire hydrants come into that rating.
Well, 50% of our ratings is the water, and we have 39 water purveyors. And it is unbelievable how many water purveyors populated the Salt Lake County area. And a number of those are almost impossible to even communicate with. We really worked hard at bringing them into the fold. But water is a key. When we get our next rating, I know that our biggest target is really gonna be continuing to work with the water purveyors to get full credit for what's there. And then get that rating.
I mean, that's tremendous information. Just as a curiosity, trying to make sure that we're consistently getting that great service that, I mean, listen, I think you guys do a fantastic job. I think you guys do great. We're glad to have you. But from an oversight of taxpayer dollars, want to make sure that we're continuing that high level of service. I was just curious how those service levels are determined. So
That in the software last year, when Chief Coker was conversation in that about maybe the next station 103 is not on Herriman Boulevard. Maybe it needs to be rebuilt right where it's at. This software will actually prove that, which is this location. So it's been ongoing. It's
That's
not
great.
every 5
Great,
years.
thank
This
you.
is a lot.
Yeah, and as I looked at the movement of that, my worry is we're pulling away from a core spar out of Herriman if we move 103 any further east. And if we move it too far east, we're really helping South Jordan more than we are helping us.
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
But we need to say that with more factual, not just a gut. All right, we need to, and we can't just draw a Google circle to figure that out, right? There's more to it than that comes with that. It's the volume of calls, it's the activity level, it's all of those things combined. It's the traffic. I'm wasting more of your time, but
No,
the
interesting stuff.
We got my agenda tonight, don't worry.
Thank you.
But anytime we want to talk some more about that, the key thing about a fire department in your community is your community saves probably 70–80% of the cost of fire protection in their insurance savings if we weren't here. Because if you were a class 10 and you had no fire insurance, 50% of your residents would lose their fire insurance and have to go find it somewhere else. The other 50% would see quadruple to 5 times the cost. So if you ask your agent, if we were in an unprotected area, class 10, would you insure me? And half of them will say no, right? And the others will tell you, yeah, of course we'd insure you, but we'll charge you $12,000 more, right? And when you factor that out across the community, it's unique by every vendor, right? Every person, but typically 70–80% of the cost of your fire department is covered by the savings in your community, and it's a good way to show that value. Plus, without the fire department, you can't develop and grow. You can't get economic development. People can't get insurance. They can't get loans. So our need to make sure that we maintain a good quality service is critical. Software like that, Intera software, helps you even look at that now. Soon you're going to be able to call it up out of curiosity, and you'll get lost in it. You'll start looking at house fires, and you'll start looking at medicals, traffic accidents and response times and turnout times. And something you're gonna say is gonna make you call Riley and say, this bugs me, right? I don't like that issue. And we've turned that to all our crews and said, help us be better. You're running the calls now, use your gut and tell us where we can improve, while we're running through a standards and cover process that dictates the things we need to do and identify our benchmarks. And when we drop below, you'll see that in the strategic plan that'll be brought to the board about measuring risk tolerance. Because what we have to do is we say, look, our response times are increasing. Here's what we can do using this software to fix it. Do you want to fix it, or are you okay with it because it costs this much? Perfect dialogue for risk tolerance, right?
Awesome.
And then you can decide, you know what, I think we're gonna be okay with 30 seconds more because I can't afford 5 million.
Great answer.
Reasonable dialogue.
Also, I'll say this, and still be Jared this, Chief Peterson's always making himself available to you if you wanna go have a lunch or schedule a meeting with him one-on-one to understand something better. We're already open up with Chief Pilgrim too, to start some tours, especially with Jared, of the whole organization, help understand that. And we can, it's fascinating to learn all that, understand the whole backbone of the system. So we'll offer that to anybody who wants to go on those trips, so.
And can I just close with saying how much I appreciate how many of you attended Riley's swearing in on Monday. That was incredibly impressive.
Well, thank you, Chief. It's our culture. And we love and appreciate that guy, and all of our team wanted to be there for that. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
Right, we will move on to item 2.2, East Herriman Water Infrastructure Discussion. Justin.
Let's see if you can do that, but dazzle.
Oh, I'm planning on going way past.
3 minutes, go.
That's fine. That's all I need.
Okay.
So as you're aware, we discussed this, I went way fast. Back on July 10th was kind of the first time that we brought this to council. We ran into, I don't want to say an issue, but when we had some development start coming in the east part of Herriman, we knew this was going to be somewhat of an issue, but we weren't anticipating this exact development to come in at this time. But this development posed an issue. We don't have water to supply this area at this time. We knew that we were going to have to, but it's a lot of infrastructure to do so. So going through this, so we wanted to just give you an update on where we are since that July 10th meeting. So we performed an analysis, and that was a little bit prior to, which kind of gave us an understanding. And I've kind of already given this to you, so I'll kind of go through a little quickly. But essentially, we conducted an analysis to kind of see what our current condition was as far as existing source and storage. It told us essentially that we were over capacity in most areas, and in some areas nearing capacity. And what that means is pump stations, tanks, and those types of things to be able to service water to our residents. It was suggested at that time that no new lots be approved in this area, which none have, because I redressed that with Brent. And again, so moving forward, this is kind of the area that I wanted to highlight. You've kind of seen this before. So these colored areas, this shaded area, is where this new infrastructure will serve water to. Okay? Below it, we've already installed infrastructure to service this area, Zone 1 in East Herriman. This is Zones 2 and 3, pressure zones, and that, based on gravity, we have to hold water back, and so the further up the hill you go, the higher the gravity. So this will service these areas. And as you can see, it's checkerboarded. There's a lot of property owners in this area, not just one or two larger property owners like you're somewhat used to dealing with. So after that, we had what was done, a pumping and storage analysis to determine different alternatives. Okay, this was to determine how efficiently we can supply water to these areas and evaluate capital and long-term operational costs to come up with the best alternatives to serve this water. We determined there are 5 alternatives. We had an outside engineering group help us with this. They recommended that a dual zone pump station, it's a pump station that will pump to 2 different zones, as I've identified, and to construct 2 2 million gallon storage tanks. was the best alternative, and that was taking into consideration, like I said, capital costs and then long-term O&M costs. So we went out and did a request for proposal, and we had 5 firms that submitted their proposals. We received 5 proposals back, and we selected Bowen Collins and Associates to perform this engineering design services. Right now, we're in the pre-design phase, and this is a very important one, because in this area, the infrastructure, it's not like it's undeveloped, and it's somewhat unplanned. I mean, each property owner has an idea of what they want. Some have actually some plans, some don't. So trying to determine where we put a tank, trying to determine how we get a pipeline from a pump station to a tank through undeveloped property can be difficult, because we don't want to harm the property owner, or in the future have to reroute and move lines because it wasn't properly planned. So more than likely, we may have to reroute some plans because we just don't know, but we're trying to do the best we can moving forward with this. So we've met with the 2 property owners that this infrastructure would eventually go on. They're both amenable to it, working with us, and we've submitted plans to them. We've kept them abroad. They have all of these studies that we performed to help, so we are all educated, so we understand how we're moving forward. And so here, I don't want to belabor this map too much, because it's very messy, but this is just some of the analysis we're going through, trying to determine different alternatives for tanks, and then also we are also looking in the future for higher tanks that need to be built in the future, so that the sites we're picking, we're not necessarily making it difficult to get to the next site, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of analysis going into this. All the property owners have been great to work with so far. And so moving forward, so that we're going to kind of a timeline now. As I said, we're in the pre-design phase, and we're anticipating that happening, completing it in March of 2020. Beginning design, and then completion, and going into bidding, we're anticipating September of this year. And then project completion, we're looking at 2021,
So
April.
We'll take and all the line in by 2021?
Yes. Obviously, like I said, this pre-design phase is very important. If that first one obviously creeps, which I'm afraid that it might, just because it's gonna take a while, then obviously everything else will creep. And so with that's where we're at. Like I said, the design is going very well, and we're working with property owners, and they're very amenable to it. So, any questions? We'll try and bring back some more information a little more frequently now that we're starting to get into design. Once we kind of pick locations of pipelines and tanks, we'll bring that back to those things. So I anticipate we'll have a good idea of what cost might be when we start the design phase. We can get some just pipeline lengths and those types of things, and we'll bring that back at that time.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, appreciate it. Right, moving on to city council board assignments, mayor pro tem, roundtable discussion. Obviously, we have to do this every year, and so it's time.
You have a list to look at.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you might be asked for it, it's been a while, so I made 6 copies. This is on a smart sheet that you print off of. And the last couple cycles of this, we have, there's a bunch of committee meetings that direction by council was to have staff attend them, but they're not needed by elected official. So you see a bunch of committee meetings, especially watch that fund. These are council meetings, and bunch that are just committee meetings. You see Meyer, Blake, Gordon's names next to it, and sometimes head on economic development. But there's a lot of stuff out there to go to. There are what's currently assigned, COG, JPAC, Joint Policy Advisory Committee, so you see abatement.
Those 3 are kind of,
They're all they're pretty combined,
yeah,
yes.
right?
But they are separate meetings.
Right, but they're kind of 3, whoever serves on one, usually serves on one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is by the direction the council decided a year ago.
Yeah.
Keep those combined, just like a few other items you'd like to group up by one person, you know, those same boards. There's representation by the city, So, there's really nothing vacant right now.
And yeah, same as the other two, sorry to interrupt, just Salt Lake County Regional Transportation Choices, County Mayor and the UTA, those are both appointed by the mayor, kind of
Correct.
because of serving on these
Yeah.
items, right?
That is correct.
And is the UTA advisory board, is that cycling out this year?
No, not the,
And that's appointment outside of here too.
yeah, that's the appointment
That's the
outside of
one,
here as well.
I just didn't know.
Yeah, I can't remember the term, but I know it's not this year.
I mean, there's not been, elected official representation for EQAC, that's environmental, quality. There was an assignment there, but they weren't attending, so. And you can see what we've done last cycle.
What about the Association of Municipal Councils, Tammy? That has Nicole's name by it, was that just one that needed to be attended, or was that an appointment to that one as well?
It's not an appointment.
It's not an appointment. So it's something that we could, or probably should have somebody attending,
Right.
correct? What's the schedule on that one, do you know off the top of your?
I don't have the latest schedule.
Yeah, we didn't print that piece off there, but that's one with the smart sheet and give you that. We have all the schedules and there's only a couple that do give compensation. And we will put Sherry's new assignment, Jordan Dye, that is a compensated board as well. But that is nominated by you all, but appointed by the governor, so we don't know how to treat that.
We just did that last month anyways.
Does it make sense?
What about this one, Wasatch Front Economic Development District?
There, as one was not getting attended by elected official, and there was direction that we consider economic development people there. We didn't list all the other committees that by direction by council, like, garden committee, and rodeo committee, and arts council committee, and only thing we kept was youth council. We wanted to really strong, thing that we wanted to keep, involved in that. Our youth.
Do you sleep?
We'll talk later. I'm sleeping right now. What about the Wasatch, or the Western Growth Coalition? Remind me on that one.
There's no one going
We
to
don't
that
have
other than staff.
to that, just staff.
Just staff is going, but another one that would be valuable probably to have
It would
somebody
be
attend.
There are elected officials who attend on a regular basis, and there are ones on EQAC, on air quality and all that too.
Air quality, yeah.
You kinda
Yeah, we
consider
didn't
what's,
have anybody on, quality, which was,
which of these do the majority of other municipalities send elected officials, because that's how and when decisions get made.
Yeah. Well, I think the majority are sending them to the Association of Municipal Councils, correct?
Yes.
yes. Yes, and I just need to.
And probably Western Growth.
Well, she has in here that COG appointed her to that,
To which one?
to the
Association.
Association of Municipal Councils. I don't recall that,
I've got
but that's what.
I've got COG coming up next week,
So would you be able to,
so I can certainly ask about that, yeah.
It says the same thing on EQAC.
EQAC is, go ahead. There are assignments that come out of COG for EQAC and all that, but many years ago, we had elected officials actually attend that, even though they weren't appointed, or
On the board,
they still went and attended the meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, so we could still do
because
that.
I went.
We
but we
absolutely
never
could,
ended
and
up
actually they
having
welcome it.
official
Yeah.
reps, so.
Well, I'll ask on Association of Municipal Councils next week, but again, I think it's, to Sherry's point, I think it's something that we should still strongly consider having somebody attend, regardless of if it is a COG appointment or not. And same with Western Growth Coalition, I think.
Yeah, and Jared attended the meeting last year when COG was giving out assignments, you weren't able to attend, and you were actually point is our COG representative that day,
Yes,
we went through the whole.
along with
list of
several
all
other
the
things to
COG
Jared, so
assignments and-
I haven't forgotten.
I was happy to volunteer, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean talking in language, but Conference of Government is COG.
Council of Government.
And COG is Council of Mayors and.
Conference of Mayors.
So, all of these, yeah, funny, huh? I heard that. So, all of these boards and committees that are listed, do we need to have somebody attending all of these, or just most of them, or?
Staff or
Yeah, all of them, so
Some
there's
attend
not
all.
elected officials.
I mean, the more we attend, the more involved we are, great, but there's only so much time, so that's.
Sure.
That's my question is, are there any that the majority of other municipalities have their elected officials attending that we don't?
It amazes me there are a few cities out there that are very good about their elected officials being at most of these meetings. South Jordan's very good about that. Sandy's kind of slipped in that area after the last election cycle. The whole group came in. It's like Mayor Dolan used to be a lot of boards and committees. I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. Mayor Hale, Mayor Camp, they're around a lot of different.
I was gonna say,
There's
there's-
there's several council members involved.
And it looks like no one's going to be like, not even staff, right? So
That's correct.
it seems like we should have somebody on that.
I mean, the name seems like.
That's basically their focus on their quality.
Yeah, that's Steve wants to go.
And
But it's nice to know too, when they meet, just be so that, you know, make sure there's no.
we didn't have any interest last time when the elected official be back.
So can I say, I think this looks great the way it is, and you guys are all doing a good job, and I think we can make this.
No, you can't. Well, what I would like to know honestly is when I do attend COG next week, because there obviously is the potential with for new assignments to be made with the election cycle just taking place. My question would be is primarily to all the council, but primarily to Steve, is there availability, is there a desire to serve on some of these other ones if they are making new, once again, if Nicole was on the Association of Municipal Councils, if that was a COG assignment, obviously with the election cycle, there's going to have to be a reappointment from that. Are these things that you are interested in that I could put your name forward for consideration if we get to that?
Jared never asked you, he just assigned you, so.
Yes, I'm taking a different approach.
EQUAC is actually, like Tammy's been trying to tell you that EQUAC meets when the second,
The second Thursday of every other month.
and there's no
At
board openings, but
7:30
you
a.m.
can attend.
That's for EQUAC.
Second Thursday,
My answer to that.
And there are several additional meetings that spin off of that in regards to environmental quality that I have attended, that there are a lot of elected officials attending, especially for Salt Lake City and for the county. So you might want to consider attending some of those as well, and I can let you know.
I think it's important to have, as many of those assignments from one way as we can, because like you said, those meetings and those groups, decisions can be made as far as the resources go.
I'm supposed to be seeing an agenda this week for COG for next week to know exactly what's on there, but again, I'm assuming with the election cycle, there's going to be a discussion about some of these assignments that come out of COG.
I remember seeing an email where it's gonna be held, I can't remember where it's gonna be held.
It's down at 20,
Yeah, it's just.
the government center, 21st South,
Columbia?
21st
No,
South,
it's at the main building.
yeah, South Building.
I mean, I think obviously the Public Works Committee, the fourth quarter working group is extremely important, as well as ZAP.
ZAP is another one, yeah, I don't know if they'll have, again, any openings on that.
ZAP board is actually, you can attend those meetings, but a lot of that is appointed again by county council.
Right.
And I would love someone to be on that because this last cycle of the big cycle, sorry, I get confused, there's two different ZAP fundings. And we made a great pitch and we didn't get any consideration at all. So the smaller items we do on the year funding for our plays and stuff, but always after going after a pretty good sizable chunk of that, like we did the rec center years ago.
Wasatch Front regional growth.
The regional
transportation.
growth, if there was an opening there, I think would be another
That's
one.
when we make sure we have people there, but here it is on elected official, and then that's when.
If there's a seat open.
I would recommend just attending, because you'll get a seat at some point. Yeah.
Isn't Mayor Ramsey the
Uh-huh.
chair of,
Oh, she's chair, she's been there, she's there.
I think she's the chair of the Regional Growth Committee now.
Can you, send
That's
us the
January.
sheet with all the?
I believe
times
that's
for all
correct,
these
yes.
What's that? I was just asking if staff could send us the list of all of these meetings with all the times and scheduling, so we can be aware of them.
Yeah, and we can do that, and we can actually do reassignments, and we'll make sure you get that information, and get the contacts, so you get the agendas, blah, blah, blah. The lengthy thing, so soon we know what we need to do.
So again, once I get the COG agenda for next week and see what it is, I'll make sure I push that out to everybody so that so we know what's on the agenda. Again, anticipating that, I don't know what type, especially with the new board assignment you just picked up, availability for you two, but I wanna know what your availability is for potential assignments on some of these other boards that come out of COG.
In general, I have a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
That sounds like he wants to do all of them.
So I can go in there, so I can go pull a Jared, great.
Well, to be fair, we planned that.
Yeah, we did.
Right, you guys talk.
We did. Ish.
It was very fun, right?
But I did enjoy him, yeah, could do that.
I think on this one, whoever's gonna be looking from the economic development team here should also be going to that.
And right now, my recommendation, we already have 2 council members involved in the finance, it'd be great to have maybe the 2 council involved in development. So you're not overloading here these local committees.
Amen?
Yeah.
Just a thought to you, just.
I like it.
Like I say, on those, I'll push that as soon as I see an agenda and we have a better idea of what we're looking at. But to know that there's at least some interest and some flexibility in your schedule to allow you to do that at least gives me the
So
opportunity
if we
to.
need to make it.
I heard that suggestion, Wasatch Front Economic Development District meeting, staff, and so I would say, you know, the 2 councilmen not gonna be involved here locally, you know, in that committee, it'll be Steve and Jared. Which one you wanna attend that one, is that, we're looking at Steve for that, cause it has great flexibility.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Steve, it is.
I'm good.
Look at that.
Should we, man?
See,
You're on the list.
we're done. This is great.
I just put his name down everywhere there was a plan.
Where there's a blank.
Yeah.
So let me ask the question just in general. Are all of you with the current board assignments that you have, and the committees that you're serving on, are there ones that it's prudent to have you continue serving? Are there ones that you wanna make a change? Are there ones that, I'm just curious, I
I'm
don't.
gonna make a comment, it's cause some of these were just assigned a year ago. I can tell you, it's good to have change, first of all, we'll make that, put that on the table. But I can honestly say, once you start getting 6 months, a year, start getting, understand what's going on there and issues, your second year and your third year is where you're really help start moving some things.
Yeah, sure.
And so,
That's what I'm just asking the question, if there's
me,
one to like,
myself, our
I'm
city,
done with this. and
time is
I-
taken care of, but I want us moving forward. And no offense to elections, but they sure mess it up for cities. They slow
I'm
it down.
great with my 2
Man.
major ones.
It's so obvious sometimes, isn't it?
I can do lots of cities that are around us in the valley, and they fumble since some election cycles.
It's not too much.
And to your question, Steve, I appreciate the question, and to your previous comment, but to Brett's point, I think it would probably do us as a city more harm than good to consider a change on any of these right now because of, again, the way that, at least for the ones that I sit on currently out of COG and COM, the synergy that exists from one to the other, is substantial, and again, the continuity there, especially on a shorter time frame and being there, was starting to get into that cycle, to Brett's point, where I feel like we actually we're gonna have to do
a certain amount of reset anyways because of the other election cycles that have happened and will cause change there. I think to unnecessarily do that for us as a city right now probably
Yeah, and
is
I don't
not the
think
best
Jared
choice.
wants to leave up Southwest Mayor's Group. I don't think Sherry, because she's just got.
She loves mosquitoes.
Yes.
She'll kill mosquitoes.
I do.
And honestly, we have a council member that's very passionate about what's going on there.
It is good, and the same with the Garvers, Wolford. It's just that there's so many things going on right now,
Yes,
that
there
it's
is.
like, then when somebody new comes on board and they have to wrap up, it's just, it
Sure.
kind of
That's
sets
a
things.
whole
That's actually a great board, but it is got some things that are moving right now.
Yeah.
It's called Wasatch Front Waste and Recycle, that's our garbage collection. And,
But, and the reason I asked the question, I just think you guys are well established in a lot of these committees. You've done some of the heavy lifting, some of you've only been there a short time and have had to really spend a lot of time and energy getting up to speed on some of these things. I just think there's wisdom in continuing as many of those that make sense. If there's ones that are particularly sources of conflict for your schedule or your priorities or something like that, if there's a change,
I'll
maybe.
just say, I'm willing to keep the current ones that I have. And I think that there's, as we just discussed,
many
there's
that
plenty
are
of
not-
opportunity
That we're not being represented in.
where we're not receiving that, to be able to do
I'll
that.
say my first year I had the history committee and the garden committee. It was,
Those seem good.
that was
the
good.
problem is they meet at night.
It was
and-
awesome. But we kind of, at least during that process, all these things were, I think, kind of terribly overlooked. And
Yeah.
so I think we have a good opportunity to fill a lot of these slots. One thing, a suggestion, I know that for ULCT, we have, I mean, it's not a roll call vote, it's whoever's in the room sort of thing, but we have 3. And why I think I do as much as I can there. They have a lot of extra meetings. That would be a good one. And I think if you're willing to, it's the first Monday of every month, and then every Monday during the session.
LPC?
Yeah.
Yeah,
To attend, it's good.
it's,
So if we both.
You really wanna do some brain damage, go spend some time on the hill.
I think the garden committee sounded good.
I mean-
You gotta hit the buoy about.
Was that
But
my
if you
outside
can do
voice?
that, and
Okay.
if we can get you on the association as council.
Do you want, so the league with you?
Yeah.
And I'll say, Jared, the Southwest has met and they're meeting their caucus on Monday mornings.
We'll be changing it to Wednesday.
Are you changing Wednesday? Okay. Great.
Well, that was the feedback from our representatives, the legislators
For them
and
to-
representatives was that.
For their availability.
So,
So I put that out in my kind of summary of
He's
our
going to
last
it,
Southwest meeting.
So that it'll be held in the Senate building, second floor. We'll get you all the information on every Monday at, it's good to get up there a little bit early, but at noon till about 1:30, 2 o'clock. They're running.
Several of those, I mean, these
Sorry, LPC for the audience is Legislative Policy
Legislative
Committee.
policy committee.
and then as many of these COG appointments, especially the growth ones, I mean, where the money is
Yeah, I'll-
appropriated. I mean, Steve's got a good financial background as well.
Yeah, if you can get him on the Zap.
I'll do whatever I
that'd be
can.
big.
so ZAP, we highlighted a couple others like the Regional Growth
Association.
Committee
RGC, yep.
down below.
Western Growth Coalition
Western Growth Coalition and the
Association.
municipal councils, right?
Yep.
That one.
Yep.
That one. That one. Oh, that's 5 if we do all those.
We'll see what we can do.
See, that seems adequate.
Well, we haven't talked about.
You guys are all giggling, this is.
So,
This is part, I have to say, like my first term, we're just starting my second one, I had no idea that these things existed. Like that meeting where we sat down with this, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I mean, I have to go, we're actually.
No, you guys set me up, you guys knew, I knew this was coming, so.
So,
I noticed that all that is you didn't have assignments, you're like, Steve, it's just funny, we didn't have anybody for that,
we'll make sure to coordinate our sheets, but we, Economic Development, Committee meets, every quarter, the 4th Monday at 1:30 at Wasatch Front. We'll send you an invite for all this, so,
Yeah, good. So,
and the address and location.
so you'll find out about the COG ones for the municipal councils.
Right.
And then go League with You, Western Growth Coalition, is that just we assign somebody here from the council, or? Says designee, how is that?
Yeah, and I have that scheduled, so I can give that to you, just they have a meeting coming up on the 7th. I'll tell you.
And
Because
then,
for right now, staff just.
so the other ones that are possibilities, that we're talking about the ZAP, the EQUAC, and maybe the Public Works too.
Public Works Committee usually comes out of an assignment from COG.
Okay,
And that comes right, you have to be part of COG to get that.
congratulations.
And those,
We
that's
actually
the thing,
won
is
that
there's
one.
no
That's
guarantee that we'll get that, because
Understood.
that's a
Right.
competitive thing.
Yeah, got it.
We have
We've,
that guy.
we've had that at times, it works to our benefit.
Oh, if that one opens up, I'll put
We
it.
brought about $30,
Okay.
$40 million in our city from that public works
Yeah, awesome.
over the
Yep,
years.
for sure.
So, Stephen, the next Western Growth Coalition meeting is Monday, January 13th, from 4 to 5. And this one will be held in the West Jordan City. I think there's a few of us that are attending.
Monday the 13th, okay. Can you send me an invite on that? What's that? It is?
We will round table with our team and then make sure we have an updated list to make sure we don't push out to you and see if we've missed anything that's accurate. And then get you all the meeting times and invites, we'll put it to your calendars. When we have the council attention on boards and committees, what's your desire? I've heard of a couple of committees you wanna have. One was the budget, the finance one and the economic. Is there other budget committees you wanna be a part of? Or do you want us to open up that whole thing of everything? The Guardian Committee, Gordo Committee,
I'd say let's have that separate conversation, talk about all of them.
I would say,
decide what-
I would suggest in our
We'll make a
additional
list.
meeting next week, maybe to bring that complete list of committees.
we'll bring you a list and look over.
And we'll look at them and, because what I'd like along with that is we look at those individual committees is a little bit of feedback from the staff that's currently overseeing them and the needs that they have. And if there's a good reason for us to be involved in there.
I do know of one, the Garden Committee, I would not recommend Rodeo Committee, unless it looks like rodeo, sorry, Wendy.
Which one?
But the one, rodeo or gardening committee, but I know that one I've heard over the years, even probably today, we got, still behind me. That is very passionate about the arts and having an elected official part of that committee, because you fund that, so it comes out of your budget. And they would love it,
The Arts Council.
unless I'm wrong.
Arts
I'm not
Council.
wrong. That smile was, I was not wrong. So you have people that
I
are
think that's a
very
good one to
passionate
consider.
about arts
Yeah,
and.
depending on time and stuff, I'd love to be part of that.
Finding that certain
They're a good,
discussions on
they're a
arts
good
and
group,
stuff,
they do a lot of phenomenal things and.
You were a professional musician of some sort.
I'm thinking maybe we should.
I did that a long time.
He hasn't said no.
I've repented of that, so.
So it's gonna be
Oh, I thought you were gonna be our
play.
That's right.
That's right, I got a Class A uniform coming and then I get to drive, yeah.
He plays the
I'm gonna play
trumpet,
the
so
bugle
he's our
for
new
the-
bugler.
Wow.
No, that's a total joke, just so.
Dang it, cause I love.
Is it one of the ones that you hold and you just hit the
Push
little
the
play
button.
button
Yeah.
right
He was
top?
making fun of us for pushing the button, so he's now our new bugler.
Chief Peterson left, but run.
Have a trumpet and two bugles,
Look for
so I
pipes
can
and
take care of
drums
all
guys,
of
too.
that.
So, and this might be another future one. We've had conversations all year long about compensation for some of these different boards. We need to have a separate conversation about setting a criteria for compensating
Yeah,
for some of
I'm
these
fine to
that
have that
take
conversation.
a lot of time.
Is that separate from next week's work meeting, or do you think you want it for next council meeting? Work
Policies
meeting
and
on the
procedures, we can do it in there, couldn't we?
22nd.
Be all right.
What do you think about that?
I'm fine if we want to add it to it. I don't know that it needs to be, that it will really be a lengthy conversation.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we
So
can
next
knock it off
Next agenda, yeah.
Alright, we'll add it on next week's policy, meeting that we're having, work meeting. Also, I will tell you this, the 28th Health and Health Updates coming up. We have our, combined meeting that we're doing, training for the plan commission as well as the council, and that'll be, it'll be ethics and, open meetings act.
On what day?
29.
29, thank you. And it'll be so we'll be coming home from,
That's the
you know,
same day as the legislature.
yeah. I know you're not gonna be here, but, how we tape it, we'll record it for you, Sherry, we will, it's open meeting anyway. We'll record it, and that way you can,
No, I found a
where
certificate.
David Church has promised to be here for that.
So I found a certificate from a year ago that's.
Long day, huh?
That's all I'm getting,
Okay.
yes. We hope that training doesn't glaze over.
We said that's the 29th, correct?
Yes, 29. I think Jacqueline's already sent you an invite on that. For the 29th.
Planning sent out
It's been on.
So,
Oh, yeah.
I just wanna make note, so I'm just at least keeping my open. These are the ones, like,
Steve, just
especially
write your
this
name
and
where it's
this,
blank.
and this, because we're talking if there's an opening in the public.
That's what we did.
Yeah,
Okay.
cause like Brett said, some of those appointments you have to be a city member on COG to be able to put in for them, others you can put other
Understood.
people in,
Okay, got it.
depending on what they are.
And Public Works is absolutely one of those, and we always desire to get that one. But I look for opportunity, hopefully they'll reassign those this January COG meeting. And, that can help, we'll get support for that.
We generally would need to have a conversation about Mayor Pro Tem as well.
Oh,
Is that something that we would like to do again this year?
I think our conversation in the past has been that we're just gonna rotate that every year,
And I think
and I don't know that there's any reason to change that.
I don't have any issue with that, we just need to have the discussion.
Other than I have an issue with it, just because Jared's on the, Southwest Mayors, Southwest Mayors, and it ends up being really an issue without a title.
you understand the title, right?
I know,
Yeah.
I
Our pro
understand the
tem
title.
is-
For us, it's,
I don't have an issue with it, but there are many other elected officials outside of this body that do not understand our form of government, and it causes an issue with some.
The mayor pro tem only means when our mayor is not able to act and chair our meetings. It doesn't mean anything else
Sounds like
outside
it to
that.
me.
So
It's all it means
I know the public
here,
has grabbed onto that, but I
People
thought,
that all the time.
they don't understand,
right?
and that's state law.
That's all, that's what it means here, and that's true. But when you go to these other meetings, how long did it take him to even allow you to come?
Tammy was there at that meeting, they talked as if I wasn't there, and the only thing that made a difference was that title, and since then.
Which was sad, is it's
sent
like, you're not,
emails, it's-
you're not a mayor, you're not part of us.
It's,
Exactly.
It was,
That's
it was
exactly how they.
it's a big deal for them.
But they have accepted.
That being said, I think that the relationships and that he's built there and the work that he's done there have, at least my impression of that is what matters. It has nothing to do with titles there anymore, because Jared's proven his worth to the group there because of Jared, not because of anything else.
Right, and I don't disagree that he's earned his spot in there, but I just think it just sends ripples where it doesn't need to be. And that being said, it's the same thing on this way. Why does it matter? The functionality of Mayor Pro Tem here is almost never. You know, I mean, how many meetings have you had to chair, one or two?
But, and to that
So
point,
it doesn't really
there was
matter.
years that they didn't assign a prayer pro tem, but I had a flooding emergency issue where we had to get enough council members together to call for a meeting, and then no one was the mayor pro tem that could actually chair it, so they had to elect someone to be the chair that meeting. And I'm trying to just get money to take care of Copper Creek at that time, we were waist deep in water.
So I guess my point is, I think that because it really doesn't matter here, the likelihood of, it's like, so you have to chair a meeting, so, and I think that the influence that it allows to continue to have on the other section of it, the people who do not understand our form of government, my feeling would be just to leave it alone and leave it how it is, so that would be my.
So just so I understand, your intent there is to then give it a meeting in this body then, because we intend it to be used to have meaning in another body. That's the way that I would interpret that.
But
Well,
but
the
it's
law
not.
doesn't give it any other meaning, there's no meaning
Okay,
here.
so-
In this meeting, it means exactly what it means by the law.
So I would say that if it really doesn't make a difference in our setting and the way we use it, we should follow what we've done in the past, which is rotate it, every year and move it on to
It's not what
somebody
we've done.
else.
And that
Done
could,
it for the last 2 years.
that could be your vote, but mine will be what I stated previously.
Okay.
I'll tell you, for that group, it does make a difference. I've had 3 of the other 5 members ask specifically about it in the last couple of weeks, and I told them that would be here. I didn't think that there would be a change in my representation there, but the title is an issue for them, for
So,
the
so
study
let me
as
ask
we move
directly,
forward.
would us changing the designated mayor, standing mayor pro tem, would that jeopardize your standing with that group, with the mayor's group? Would
Feel
that,
it would cause some issues.
How so? Because, again, and this has nothing more to do than just the discussion that we're having, but to Stephen's point, if we made a change to that tonight, are they gonna ask you not to be on that group anymore?
I would hope not. I wouldn't think so. But the perception, not only from that group, but again, outside bodies, as was discussed in previous meetings, which is so important, is perception. There is that perception.
so,
It matters on the outside.
the
It
reason
doesn't
I
matter
ask
to us functionally,
so-
but it matters.
so anecdotally, you told me a story about when there was an organizational meeting early on, and they were talking about issuing a statement. They had mayor, and then it was a council member, Henderson, and they had an issue with that. And you had to discuss with legal counsel whether or not you could actually use the term mayor pro tem as a signing on that document, is that correct?
That's what they wanted to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that allowing,
It seems silly, but I understand that that's just
yeah,
what they do.
Me,
right?
I think
you guys-
it's silly.
You guys know I don't use the title.
Yeah. I felt like allowing other entities to dictate how we make our assignments and the people we choose to represent us on those groups and the meaning that they put behind, the fact that they're trying to put separation between, or difference between the title of a mayor and a council member, I think is completely unfounded and unwarranted, to be honest, because I think that would in turn diminish the functionality and the abilities of their own councils to try and say that because you don't carry that title with you, that we're not gonna allow you or to participate in this group, or that it diminishes what you bring to that group. And honestly, I don't feel like, again, based on our previous conversations, that the policy we were gonna follow, I don't feel like that I would want to give in to what they're trying to make it when it doesn't change what it truly is on our side. So, like I say, and that has nothing to do with Jared and the work that you're doing there, because I know how instrumental you have been on the group, and I know that that's because that you're Jared, and it doesn't matter about anything that goes along with it. And again, I think that they recognize that, and that they're not gonna change that in any form just because now you're not mayor pro tem, which again, even based on state statute, doesn't do anything other than allow you to chair a meeting in the absence of the mayor here, so.
Can I ask a question? Total ignorance question here, right? Is there a way that we can give you that designation to serve in that committee and then have somebody else? Cause I understand can be changed every week, it could be changed for every meeting, it's just
I think it just causes
it's just
confusion.
I have an idea.
I'm just saying, it's just an administrative thing more than it is
So
any
then I have an
authority
idea.
thing, right?
I will waive my year and Jared can serve this next year instead of me, and Clint can take the last year.
It's not
Because
my
I'm
decision.
I'm totally fine with that. I won't take a turn, do not care about it, I just want things to function as they are. I will waive my year and say my year will be this year and
Well,
Jared will.
Oh, I appreciate that,
Just
but I
finishing
don't.
my question, I'm just saying that is there a way that we can designate Jared as pro tem for those meetings and then have a standing pro tem,
I think
just,
that's confusing.
I do too. I think,
I mean, if
Like I
if
say,
it's that important for that council to have that title,
ridiculous.
Well, I think it's ridiculous too, but we deal in the world of politics. And there is an exponential amount of ego involved in politics.
Oh, I get that.
And so we have to figure out how to.
But again, then we're
Yeah.
giving validity,
Sorry.
we're giving
But
validity to the
That's-
fact that they think it means something when even by state statute it doesn't.
But you can't control public perception, yeah, I guess is my point. Right?
No,
Yeah,
I
would
get
just
that.
say, but in our city, should we not make sure that our public understands the accurate meaning of that? So whatever you do in these other committees, we do need to make sure that our own community understands what that is so that they aren't using those titles incorrectly either, and so that they understand that our council is a body of 5. So as long, I think, no matter what you guys decide, I do think that it is important for all of us to make sure that we're letting our community know the accuracy of our form of government.
You look, our own community doesn't know, the broader community
Because it gets
understands.
used on social media
Media doesn't
very
understand,
inaccurately.
they call Jared Mayor for 10 in news article going,
Well, and that's really my
Only-
point.
only in
That's
re-
interesting.
only
That's
in-
really my point, is
only in
if we
relation
change,
to
I know,
Southwest mayors.
I know,
Yeah.
I know how they.
Right,
use it,
cause
it's like-
that's.
but to
it
Tammy's
means something
point,
to-
that's really what the point that I'm trying to make here is if we're gonna say we're gonna do it because of a perception, we're buying into the misrepresentation of what that really is to our own people in my mind. And that's what I'm trying to say is, I don't think any of us in here care about the title behind our name, that we stand on our own merits, the committees that we sit on and the work that we do there, and it shouldn't matter whether it says mayor or mayor pro tem or council member before it. We're here to represent Herriman City, plain and simple. And that's what I think needs to be communicated is that this body is all equal. And that we're all going to equally share that information and to represent the city appropriately in these, regardless of what the group is called or who's appointed or that. Because again, at the end of the day, the only thing that mayor pro tem means is that when the mayor's not here, you conduct the meeting. That's it. And like I say, I guess I'm being a little bit overly passionate about it right now, because just for me, I had no inclination that we were gonna change what our previous direction and decision had been as a council as far as rotating this on a yearly basis, coming into this discussion tonight, so. I know that there's been discussion previously about the title as it relates to the Southwest Mayor's Group, but again, coming into tonight in this discussion, I had no communication or inclination that there was a reason to change what our agreed upon direction had been previous to that, so.
Okay, just not it.
I'm in.
I will stand by the same. I just think that it's great to inform the public. I think that Mayor Pro Tem serves exactly the same purpose, whether Jared sits in that seat or whether any of us sits in that seat. So, but it serves a greater purpose in my mind just to let it be status quo with the relationships that have already been established. I think it does more benefit for the city to allow him just to continue with the title, because it does have meaning outside of the circle, whether it should or not. I can't control their education. They're educated people, but somehow they don't seem to figure that part out. So I again will reiterate that I think it should just stand, and I am 100% willing not to take a turn and have Jared take my turn. I have no problem with that. That's my vote. So we gotta make a decision, because there's lots of people here and it's 7:03.
Been a long night.
I'll say my preference would be to keep it for the reasons I've stated, the perception.
Yes.
The Southwest vision that's moving forward, all the work we've done legislatively. However, I'll do whatever the council wants to do.
So just as a matter of currently, it's my understanding that we have to reappoint if we want to continue, unless Steve comes up with an actual decision. Because we would not have a mayor pro tem until
Are you
that.
sure about that? Because once you're appointed until you appoint.
I was understanding we had to reappoint every year. My understanding was it was just for 2019.
Because it's for calendar year 2019.
That's my understanding.
Oh, that's how we appointed him?
Resolution then?
Yes.
Okay.
So if
Because it could be.
We wanna have the option to change it.
So if we don't have direction from the council that's a majority, we just don't do anything at this point. So that's kind of where we come to at this point, since
Your idea is to make a decision.
I just don't wanna do it, that's all I was saying.
I'll leave Wes decide.
So is that it? So
So basically.
you
it's
think
up to
Jared, you think we should rotate it, you think we should rotate it? Awesome.
You can choose not to have an opinion, and we can just delay it until, and we have a discussion about it next week.
No, you know, I'm gonna go ahead and just say, it's irrelevant, just, I'll support Jared continuing this year, I think that's fine. I don't have an issue.
I don't know, everyone's looking at the clock, when we start at 7:30 in there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I know there's
So
residents here for
that-
these next two things, so we're hoping to get.
That is, any further discussion on either of those items then? Okay, then we move on to 2.4, discussion of a request to rezone 4.53 acres of property located at 13494 south, 7530 west for Stephen, I'm not gonna say that right. Weiler, from A1 to A25.
Oh, and there's the,
There you go, alright.
So, of course, as a legislative matter, this is something that has been reviewed by the planning commission, and they have forwarded a positive recommendation to the city council for your consideration to approve the rezone request. The original application said 5 acres. The data we received from the county recorders, I think is rounded and is saying 4.53. We'll make sure that in the ordinance that you would consider at your next meeting, we'll have the exact acreage on this property. So we'll clarify that in the future. You can see in the vicinity map, this is right on the city's boundary with the county. It does comprise 3 parcels. The Planning Commission, there was a community meeting on this. We had 3 residents attend the meeting. The Planning Commission held a hearing. They made a recommendation to have a zoning condition of 1.9 units per acre with half-acre lots bordering high country, which is encouraged in the A.25 zone, which the applicants are requesting.
Isn't that what has been done consistently
Yes.
through that area?
Yeah. And that is one of those density bonus options. The baseline zone density in this is 1.8. And so by having the half-acre lots adjoin the estates, it gives them that extra 0.1. So that's the 1.9 that's recommended by the Planning Commission. Again, this is the current general plan. The request for the rezone is consistent with the general plan. You can see the density ranges of 1.8 to 2.7. This was a concept subdivision plan. The subdivision will be forthcoming. This is the original request of 14 lots. Obviously, if this rezone is approved with the zoning condition, this would be redesigned with 9 lots and the half-acre lots on the left-hand side of the screen. But it'll be some form of a cul-de-sac. Again, the development standards that we quoted in your staff report, that base zone is 1.8, cannot exceed 2.5 within the 8.25 zoning designation. We believe, again, that 9 lots will fit with the density bonus, with the more accurate legal description from the county. So again, that is the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Any questions on the proposal tonight?
Is it gonna be a private road?
Yeah, and all improvements will be required along the frontage, which was one of the concerns during the neighborhood meeting, community meeting.
Despite not being able to download the packet, I read it all yesterday.
Oh.
That link is,
It
too
was
big
a
for my
large
iPad.
packet, yeah. Yeah.
but from what I read, the zoning condition, the planning commission gone through is consistent with what
Yeah,
has been
yes.
done
Yes,
in the surrounding areas.
So again,
Do you
typically
guys
this
have
would,
any concerns?
no,
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
And I think the resident meeting, they were just traffic, but it's just what it is out there.
Concerns about making sure we had sidewalk in place and.
Oh, yeah, cause it stubs to them.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. All right, 2.5 discussion proposed rezone of 7 acres of MU2 mixed use to C2 commercial and RN multifamily residential for a proposed development known as Academy Village for John Lindsley located at 4002 West Real Vista Drive, including parking structure, site plan, and design guidelines.
So I learned something today about Bryn. She loves these big master plan projects, and I'm thinking that is one of the reasons why we're a good fit together. So she has been the staff planner on this project. She and John are both going to be talking with you about the various components of this project. So I'm going to turn the remote over to Bryn.
20 minutes?
Just a quick question
Yeah.
ahead of it. I mean, we've had conversation about this ongoing, what's different now than before. My understanding is that it's finally cleared planning commission.
That's all it is, so this should be pretty
Nothing
quick.
else is really-
Nothing has changed. Yeah. So there's two pods. Again, they rezoned, part of it a couple weeks ago, planning commission, the other part a couple months ago, so now it's just all coming to you. Everything's gone through planning commission, like you said, so. Just, again, quick update, the property is currently part of Rosecrest, so we'll be removing it from Rosecrest, putting it into the Wasatch South Hills Development Agreement, and John will go over that in a little bit. They're both asking for rezoning, on the properties, and I'll go over that. So you'll be looking at, rezone, the planning commission has approved the site plan for the entire thing. So it's just up to you now for the rezone and the development agreement. This is the rezone for both of them. Again, all C2 with just a little pieces of residential on both sides. This is the site plan. Again, this hasn't changed from what you've seen for months. Parking structures on both sides, small piece of residential on both sides, and then the retail, office, commercial.
And we're not increasing any density anywhere, correct?
This is density that they have in their development agreement.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're not getting any new density into this project.
No. This again just details of square footage of the buildings. The planning commission went over everything, landscaping, amenities, sidewalk connections. The planning commission went over all this over several meetings. They didn't have any commercial design guidelines in their existing development agreement because they didn't have any commercial. So they're adding commercial design guidelines, which you had in your packet. Planning commission has recommended approval of those. They made a few changes. Again, those include landscaping, building architecture, parking standards, again, a little bit different because of the parking structure. So we wanted kind of a little bit of a variable for the parking requirements. And amenities, they've included some amenities showing where different open space, benches, amenities might be on the property. That's all I have, and then John's gonna talk about the development agreement. Any questions about the zoning of the site plan? See, fast. John?
Okay, a couple weeks ago, I handed out to you a development agreement. The developer has requested an amendment to that development agreement that I handed out, so I'm handing out a new one.
Is this just an amendment or the entire agreement?
That's the entire agreement. Well, it's the amended, the change.
New amendment.
Yeah. I don't know if you want me to go through the changes that they're requesting, or if you already know about it, just seeking council direction.
Could you go over real quick?
Please review. Okay, so, pod 35 and 39 will be removed from the Rosecrest Development Agreement. That's no big surprise to you, that's not really an issue. And it'll be re-recorded. This is the existing Rosecrest master plan, where that arrow is the property, so that will be removed. So the Wasatch Development Agreement, this is basically what this provides. The property would be rezoned, that's not part of the development agreement, it's separate. The legal description would be amended to include pod 35 and 39, and commercial design guidelines would be added, and those are part of your packet. And those guidelines have been reviewed and approved or recommended by the planning commission. So there's the proposed, master plan for South Hills. So these are the things that they've asked to be removed. So the ownership, there's no transfer without consent of the city, they've asked that be removed. We attach a site plan to the development agreement, they asked that that be removed. We had a phasing concept in as an exhibit, they requested that be removed, and a statement that all roads would be constructed and maintained by the master developer, the HOA. And then this great paragraph that kind of creates a priority in case there's a conflict. So, you want direction from the city council?
Can you go back a slide, please, Joe?
That one?
Yes, please. So this is things that they've asked to be removed?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just wanna know the reasoning behind the ask of these particular items to be removed.
You want me to speak on that, Jim?
Sure?
Okay, first off, and I'm just gonna speak candidly, okay? We've been doing this for a long time. These items were never really discussed or agreed to on our side as a developer. One of the things there's no way that we're gonna be able to do, which I think is a little absurd, is there's no way we're gonna give up our rights as landowners and say that we need to get approval from the city in order to sell land. I mean, we're just gonna take that right off the table, right?
Yep.
I don't think that makes any sense from anybody's standpoint. I don't think anybody's gonna agree.
So we don't have any money in it, I mean, if we
No.
propped it up somehow maybe, but.
Yeah, I mean, the claim was that we're telling you what our intentions are and how we intend to maintain this property because we're gonna own it and we're gonna lease it and we need to treat it as such. But to come back and say we want to put a restriction on you can't sell it without our approval is, in our idea, a little overreaching. So we're asking for that not to be put in, not necessarily be removed because we never had it in the first place. The site plan, there's a pretty good reason why. And we're in the middle of discussing with the city how we can get a parking structure approved. The parking structure is proposed because it's going to double the density. Doubling the density is gonna benefit the city.
The commercial
taxpayer.
density.
Commercial
Not the residential.
No, multi-family, yeah, okay. So the commercial density will be doubled, and for us to surface park what we would be proposing, we would literally lose probably half of that density. So we're proposing the parking structure, but a $16 million parking structure doesn't pencil, right? This is the whole problem that developers always face, and so when we work with counties, we create CDAs, and a lot of times that's where the subsidy comes in, is because we need the parking structure to be paid for, hard costs only, we bear the burden of soft costs, but we need those hard costs to be covered so that we can maximize the density, which we show pays back the city within the timeline of the CDA anyway, so we feel it's a win-win, and that's the reason why I can't put a site plan in there, because in a way, it locks us down to having to build what is in the site plan, and yet we're still negotiating the parking structure. So I'm comfortable showing you and giving you a site plan which is that 50% less, but to me, it doesn't make sense. We're still, we have a site plan that we've put up there that we feel is very prominent. It's a well thought out site plan. We need to finish the details of the parking structure. Right now, I don't see the purpose of locking in an exhibit, which is just a site plan, when we're still negotiating it. We can move forward with the amendment, and I don't see it being an impact to having to have a site plan in or not. We're still gonna build the maximum that we can possibly do as developers, right? So that's the site plan. The phasing exhibit, I think we can probably come up with some kind of an exhibit, but it's gotta be somewhat loose because this is all driven on leases. If I get a call tomorrow that I got a grocery store that wants to go in, we're gonna go out and start building that grocery store, right? But if we are trying to lease up the retail space on the corner closest to the training facility, we're gonna focus on that. So to tie us down to a phasing plan, we're gonna build all of pod 39, and we're gonna build all of pod 35, and it's gonna be driven partially on how we negotiate leases that we're currently working on. So I'm okay to put something in the phasing plan, but for that reason, it's gotta be fairly loose. We gotta be able to go across pod 35 and build a grocery store, for example, if we get called tomorrow to do that, so.
So, if I can explore that one just a little more, maybe, you know, Clint's expertise from the planning commission side, at least I would think the reason to ask for specific phasing is that the city has to provide services, right? Whether it's roads or water, sewer, police, fire, etc. Most of the time, I'm more concerned about those with large residential developments that are drain on all of those. In this case, this is a somewhat prepared commercial site, and quite frankly, I don't care what they start with or how it phases out, because if it, yeah.
Well, and I think-
But what's more important is the site plan, we can go back to that.
Yeah,
My
and I
opinion.
think a lot of times the phasing too is to help ensure that if there's a combination of residential and commercial, that we don't just get the residential and the commercial goes away, you know, so that's some of the protection, and I think, and I agree that I think that this is a different or a different product than those type things. To your point, I'm not as hung up on the phasing as I am the site plan issue.
And sometimes the phasing for the planning commission is, if they start in the back, do all the sidewalks, never get built, that connect in the front, you know what I mean? But like I said, these roads are there, the sidewalks are there, it's kind of a different situation.
And to tell you what our intentions are, we're going to build Pod 39 as our first phase and Pod 35 as our second phase. That's the plan, right? It's subject to change based on leasing. But when we go in to put in the infrastructure and say Pod 39, we're not going to build the first couple hundred feet of it. We're going to go and build all of the infrastructure in Pod 39. So then we have finished pads that are stubbed ready. So as soon as we get a lease agreement, boom, we're ready to go on that pad. So that's our intentions from master developer standpoint. And that probably is the last point there, roads will all be constructed and maintained by master developer and HOA. So
That's also the preferred way to develop it on the engineering side.
Say that again.
That's also our preferred way that they do it, is
Build it all,
build the backbone infrastructure completely. It
Oh, yeah.
makes it so much better for inspection, review, good boards.
it's more efficient for us.
Both sides, it makes it better for you too. Somebody wants to lease, it's ready to go.
Exactly.
So pulling, this out, why, and if you're gonna build it all anyways, why are we pulling this out?
So it's a requirement, and for us, we want the flexibility. Phasing is not just the infrastructure. Phasing is build this
You'd be
building,
telling them
build that
build
building,
this
build this building.
I just mean it specifically on the roads.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that they're talking about phasing the roads. I think they're talking about phasing the entire project.
So what's the concern with all roads will be constructed, and maintained by master developer or HOA?
I don't know why, honestly, it's in there. It doesn't make sense to me, because that's what we're planning on doing. So, I don't know, John, do you know why it's in there to be removed?
I thought you asked for it. The
No.
draft you gave me does not have that in there, so I assume that.
We can clarify it now. I don't see any problem with us building the roads and maintaining it from an HOA. I'm fine with that. That's what we're planning to do.
Okay.
Then if I can go back to the site plan, is that?
Can I ask for one clarification, since that's the bigger topic, I think? On the first bullet point, obviously, I get not having that language in there. Just reiterate or clarify for me, is it your intent to own all of this land, or are you, because that's what I've been under the impression, or is there a possibility or an intent to sell some of this?
Right now,
in the
there's
future?
zero intent of
Okay.
doing that. This whole thing was a tax nightmare for us in the first place. We 1031 into this. We don't wanna do it again, but I'm not gonna create a limitation that we can't. Our investors are not gonna want for me to go to them and say, you can't sell this without city permission.
No, I understand.
That's a huge.
Like I said, I just wanted to clarify that I had understood your intent
Our
is
intent
to
is right now.
maintain ownership.
Absolutely, and
Okay.
even the buildings that we're not going to build, we're planning on doing a land lease. See, because we're still owning the land and it doesn't trigger our tax, issue.
Okay.
So there's a couple pads that we're talking about doing just land leases on, the bank, pharmacy, and the gas station. All three of those make sense for us to do land leases on. We're still gonna maintain ownership of it and control the HOA of the master community.
Okay.
But there are some, and you correct me if I'm wrong, there are some commercial applications, like certain companies that won't build there unless they own the land. And so if we put this in there, you have to say no, even if it's a good fit, you have to say no, you can't come because we can't sell anything, right?
Exactly.
So it opens up a window for you.
I understand that. Absolutely. I'll tell you right now, a prime example, we'd love to get a Maverick in there. They're great partners of ours, with RSL and everybody. They do not lease land. And so it kills our negotiation right up front if we don't even have the building. So, even though it creates a huge tax nightmare for us, we just can't take it off the table and give up our rights to be able to do it. And not to say that the city wouldn't even say it's fine to go ahead and do it anyways. I just don't see the reason for having it in place. It just creates too many issues.
Go ahead,
But I think the two are kind of connected, ownership versus site plan. I think that's just an attempt, there's no harm in asking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we always say in these sorts of things, we ask for it. If I were in your shoes, I would say no, but really it's looking for protection on our side, right? So to me, the next point is the next piece that would help us ensure that. So we've had tons of developers come in and promise the world and not deliver anything. You guys are the only ones, in my opinion, who have truly delivered on, like you said, not just once, but consistently. So that's there, but we have to do our job to make sure that there's
that we have some protection, and the site plan generally is that next layer of protection. We're gonna get what you're saying.
In John's words, the site plan is the shiny new car, by attaching it, that's what ensures that we get the shiny
That's what
new
you
car.
showed us, so we wanna make sure we get that. So
I
to me, that's.
totally understand the negotiation centered around the parking structure that's within there. But again, if that parking structure doesn't go, it dramatically, as you've just said, changes
Right.
this whole area.
Can we add
here's my
language
question.
that makes a site plan subject to
I
the
mean,
parking garage? And
I
if
mean,
it changes, we can change the site plan?
yeah.
Well, yeah,
It
the
just
site plan's been
sidesteps it,
approved,
right?
the site plan's been approved by the planning commission.
I wanna
If he
know,
changes anything, it goes back to planning commission.
my question with all of this is what's the problem with the parking garage? We've been told for months and months,
Well, that's
no
what
problem,
Alan's gonna
no
talk about.
problem, we have the CDA, that's the crux of this whole thing.
We're gonna go through that.
If,
What,
if you told me.
it was a line item agenda, item
It's
on
I'll
the
tell you
draft.
this, there's something changing right now.
So
and
what-
We'll go over that.
And that's what I'm reading into this, is there seems, I'm reading that there's an issue with that. That's a huge issue for us, cause how do we have any protection for the city and the residents? How do they proceed with building anything? What's the issue?
Yeah.
That's
And I'll
what
tell you, as we
It's
get to
the
that,
CDA, so.
if we knew the parking structure was ready and funded and we all agree that we're going to do it, you can put that site plan in there, cause we've already spent a
Right.
lot of
Which
money
I
on
think is
that
what
site
we-
plan in
That's
theory.
what I thought.
We're ready to go
That's
forward.
that's what the direction we're going, that's
Yes.
what we've been presenting.
So just know from our side, we're ready to commit to that site plan for the parking structure.
Okay.
Do we want Alan to do this?
Sorry, I was a little
Now
concerned, cause
or-
it was on the one draft
Right.
and then it wasn't on the
We can
final one.
Cliffhanger for after?
We should probably, accept a motion to,
Can I just pause for a moment? We have an issue that have a lot of residents here on impact fee, 2.12. Justin just asked me if we just had a few minutes, you think we get that covered? Because all those people wanna go home, they like it, but they don't.
Raise your hands if
like
you're
it.
here.
okay, alright, I don't have any issue with that, so.
It shouldn't take very long.
Thank you. It's pretty simple. It's like- John's listening to your residents, so.
And I've been from the.
Say you have two.
Okay, jump ahead to.
That's the Megan Green,
Oh,
You're not
well, that's
happy,
what
that's
we're
why
doing.
Okay, so this one could be fairly quick, we've done this before, so I just wanted to kind of get this through, so. This is a water impact fee adjustment on a lot, okay, that it's a large lot, but it has some undevelopable area within the lot, okay, so we wanna adjust the impact fee. The water impact fee, as you can see, is based on size of property, okay? So the more property you have, the higher the impact fee, makes it equitable because your outdoor water use is higher. So what happened on the last time, that the council approved, not all of you are on the council, but I went through and we created a procedure on how to handle these in the future. So basically the procedure is, if there's a portion of the lot must be deemed unbuildable, but it must be on a plat, okay? And then it's restricted, and this restricted area will then be charged an impact fee, but it will be at a 50%, okay? Because it's somewhat difficult for us to enforce this forever. Property changes hands, then possibly they could go on landscape, so we wanna have some protection there. So this is the lot. As you can see, it's a large lot. These hashed areas on the plat are deemed buildable, the rest of this is deemed unbuildable. Generally, that means it's greater than a 30% slope, and this is a natural drainage course, okay? So basically, the standard fee of the 1.6 acre lot would be around $13,000. If we go through and we do the adjustments for the buildable, unbuildable, take out the 50%, it reduces that down to about an $8,921 impact fee with a difference of $4,200. So that's essentially what we're doing. We're going back to the procedure that was put in place after the last adoption. That's simply where it is. It has to come to council for your approval. We'll bring it back to a general meeting. I just wanted to bring it to you so you understand where we're at.
So it follows what we put in place, you're not asking for anything extra.
As long as it follows
special.
Okay. Perfect. So it'll come to the next council meeting for approval.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. That came up, oh no, not.
With that-
Easy ones first.
Yeah, next time now I'll accept a motion to temporarily adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Appreciate that.
You are welcome. pre-bid inspector